Oh, good Lord. Okay, so I'm gonna get rolling. I'm gonna power through the last of this relatively practical information. I'm going to recover the final stuff one last time. I'm going to give you some parting words of wisdom, and when I'm done, you will be free to go and never have to come to this class again.
Monday review,
and Tuesday final. So I'm going to talk a little bit. We've been talking about cash management, working capital management. I'm going to talk about ways to speed up that cash conversion cycle, practical ways, things that the real world actually does. So we're not going to do any calculation stuff. We're going to talk about real world things. The real world things include a lockbox arrangement. So when you guys are paying your bills, if you still pay them by check, it'll be like P.O. Box, 6-digit long P.O. Box, Dallas, Texas. That's the famous one for Bank of America. Bank of America clears from Dallas. A couple other ones clear in, or we'll have a lockbox sitting in South Dakota. What you're doing is you're mailing your check directly to the bank, and the bank deposits it and then sends the stuff off to, a list of who's paid and copies of the checks off to the company that you bought stuff from. So what you'll do is that way it doesn't go to the company and then the company has to input it and send it to the bank. It just goes directly to the bank. The bank deposits it first and then ships it forward. And normally the bank will do this for two reasons. One, they want your money. So they don't want you to have your money because in case you've got loans there, you might deposit the check somewhere else. So they want to make sure the checks get deposited to the lockbox. So they'll require you to have a lockbox, so they'll give you one. But the other thing is it reduces float because there's no delay in the mail going to your place and then you having to get it to the bank, and it's 24, 48 hours. And sometimes 24 to 48 hours makes a difference, especially when you're talking millions or hundreds of millions of dollars a day worth of cash transactions. The other things that you can do as a business, and we talked about prepayments and talked about Dell, how they basically have you prepay things, then they go through the process of ordering, then they put your computer together, and they have a negative cash collection cycle. There's things you can do, which again, as a consumer, you know that this stuff happens because we normally sign up for it. And the companies will tell you it's for your convenience. We'll do an automatic debit from your bank. We'll do paperless billing. So if you got your cell phone and they go, just give us your bank account and we'll automatically debit your bank account. We might even give you $5 off a month for your order, from your cell phone. We'll automatically, and you don't have to worry about a thing. You don't have to worry about sending us a check. You don't have to worry about you won't be late on your. The reason they do it is because they know darn well that they're going to hit your account the same day. Normally, you'll notice they'll schedule it like the 5th. And so that way, they know a lot of folks get paid on the 1st or 3rd with Social Security. So they schedule it for the 5th so that way, especially older folks who still write checks, who are on Social Security, they get their Social Security checks on the 3rd. They write their checks. But if they have this automatic debit system, before those checks end up clearing, their cell phone people, their cable people, what have you, have already taken the money out of their account. So you can set this up so you go, okay, as soon as I send you a bill, I'm going to automatically take it out of your bank account. It speeds up your cash collection process. You don't have accounts receivable. You don't have to call for collection. You only have to call for collection if this comes back not sufficient funds. Concentration banking. Essentially, it gives you an opportunity to put a bunch of bank accounts together into a central pool so that you have a larger amount of cash in one spot. And what that does is the bank will give you credit for having big deposits, because remember, they're generally not paying you a bunch of interest on these things, but they're loaning it out at interest. So you get an opportunity to kind of maintain a central cash pool and put all the money that you might need for, if you have a store in Lacey and you've got a store in Seattle and you've got a store in Woodinville and you've got a store in Everett, each one of those you might have a U.S. bank account for, and you deposit, the day's deposits in a U.S. bank account, and then everything collects to a central account. That's your concentration banking. Essentially, if you've got remote locations, you use a bank or a series of banks that work together. So in our region, for instance, big ones for concentration banking, Bank of America, U.S. Bank, Chase. Wells Fargo, because they're around. The retailers, each retail store does their night drops at each one of those banks, and then the corporate every day kind of clears all those accounts out and brings it up to a central account. And so the only thing that sits in a store's account overnight is that day's deposit. And normally stores, retail stores, cannot write checks on their own account. All they are is deposit accounts. Then the money gets swept up into the central bank account and is managed centrally by corporate. And when I was CFO of a restaurant chain, we had 400 restaurants. That's exactly how we did it. We had 3 different banks. They'd make a night drop. We'd look and see what the night drop was and take the money the next morning. And actually had it set up to be pretty much automatic. On the other side, you can slow things down. So we've talked about disbursement control, payables concentration. So you have essentially all the money comes to one spot and all the payables come to one spot. So in the case that in the situation I was in, where we had 400 stores, the store or the restaurant would only maintain about $1,000 to $2,000 worth of petty cash in case they ran out of something. They could literally run to the store and buy ingredients. Otherwise, everything was delivered by U.S. Foods. It was delivered every 2 days, and all the payables were concentrated at corporate. So we can then time out when we were going to make those payments. Now, if we didn't get the invoices from the store, so the store would, let's say, have someone come in to fix an oven, and we didn't get that invoice, sometimes those wouldn't get paid. It would slow things down for payments to the vendors. But if I'm a cash manager, as long as my business isn't really suffering from that slowdown, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing that does, by the way, as a practical matter, is if you are a retail store manager or restaurant manager, or you're sitting out in the hinterlands of somewhere, and you've got a vendor who's angry at you, and you're in a payables concentration environment, you blame corporate and give them corporate's number and say you can't control it. And that works well for retail managers. That works well for distant offices. We've talked a little bit about zero balance accounts. Those are accounts that essentially you've got a checking account and it's got a zero balance in it every day. If there's deposits, the deposit goes in. If there's checks clearing, the checks clearing go in. They net each other out. And if you're short money, they take an automatic draw off a line of credit. And if you're over money, they put money automatically against your line of credit and pay it down. And if your line of credit's already zero, they put it into an overnight repurchase agreement or a short-term CD, and it sits in a savings account essentially until they need to draw it back. So what this does is it keeps you having no money in your checking account, where you tend to have no interest payments. And it tries to optimize out. You only draw money when you need it off your line of credit to cover checks that are clearing. You pay it back as quickly as you can. And to the extent you have excess cash, it then drives down to a savings account. So this is a way to kind of optimize your interest expense, is to use a zero balance account. Controlled disbursement accounts are what we have here at St. Martin's. Essentially, we have an account which says, when we write checks, and many of you get checks from St. Martin's, refund checks, we actually report them back to the bank and say, you can pay Jason his check for $22,000 of refund that he's getting from St. Martin's. If we don't do that, that check will get bounced back as not authorized. So we can have essentially nothing will happen until that check is authorized. So if we slow down authorization for control purposes, it doesn't necessarily go out until we tell it to go out. And we provide them with a list daily of, okay, here's the checks that we've written, here's the ones that are authorized. That way, if someone steals our check stock and forges a check, it doesn't get paid. It has to match the payee, the amount, to the list that we send to the bank. And if it doesn't, then it won't get paid. When you've got excess cash, there's a couple things you can do with the excess cash. Marketable securities are one of those things. You'll see marketable securities on balance sheets routinely. They're essentially securities that can be turned into cash very quickly. It says little risk. In some cases, that's true. In some cases, it's not. It really depends on what the security is. If it's short-term bonds or overnight repurchase agreements or commercial paper, yes, that's got little risk. If it's common stock, which is also a marketable security, you may see significant volatility and higher risk. Some companies use these to substitute for cash balances. So if you know you've got an extra $1.1 million, and you're not going to need it for 30 days or 45 days. Instead of leaving it in your savings account, or instead of putting it into a checking account, you can put it into an overnight repurchase agreement. You can put it into a 30-day CD. You could buy a short-term bond or commercial paper if you're pushing up into the $10 million range. That becomes a marketable security, and you can get higher returns on it than you would just sitting on your cash. As noted here, they're temporary. You shouldn't be sitting on marketable securities for a long period of time. What you should be doing if you have excess cash is one of three things. What are those three things? Pay off your debt. Reinvest it in projects that are going to have higher than the required rate of return, or give it to shareholders and dividend it out. So you should not, and that's kind of a good couple things to keep in mind as we go into next week. If you have excess cash, you don't sit on it. There's a couple, three things you can do with it. We just talked through marketable securities, short-term maturity, low risk, very liquid, and low return, because the risk is low. Remember, there's no free lunch. In finance, there is no free lunch. You have higher risk, you get higher return. You have lower risk, you get lower return. If someone ever tells you that you could get all this money and there's no risk, they're lying, or it's illegal. In which case, that's got risk. It's just a different kind of risk. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Oh, no, it's not. You pay tuition. So there is no such thing as a free lunch. And even if you think it's a free lunch, it wasn't a free lunch. Even if you don't think you paid tuition, you earned that tuition. Your need to pay the tuition. On the credit side, so now you're making all these sales. When you're making sales to somebody on credit, you are making a loan. You are loaning that person or that business your money. It's a loan, folks. You're loaning money. You're in the banking business. How many of y'all, if you got like a small store or manufacturing company, think you're going to be good bankers? If you're going to be good bankers, go be bankers. So extending credit, you're acting like a bank. You're making the same type of credit decisions. I'm loaning money to somebody, or I'm loaning money to a company. So there's a few things you need to actually keep in mind, and you got to act a little bit like a bank. The first thing is you should have credit standards, credit terms. How quickly are they going to pay? You should probably get a credit application from the business that you're extending credit to. Make them put down 3 or 4 different folks that they also have credit from. So for instance, if you're a manufacturer and you manufacture textiles like Unilite, and you're going to sell something to companies like Macy's and Bon-Ton and Fowler's and other places, and some of these I named for a reason, you go, okay, let me go extend credit to Bon-Ton, which is an East Coast regional chain, which happened to go bankrupt last week. So if you didn't check in with other folks who sell stuff to Bon-Ton and realize that they're paying out at 90 to 120 days, if at all, because you're making the credit reference calls going, we're looking at extending credit to Bon-Ton. What's your payment experience? How quickly do you get paid? Do you ever not get paid? Are they easy to work with? Which are questions you should ask from a credit perspective. And by the way, business credit, not like personal credit, you can ask those questions. Personal credit's a little bit tougher because there's Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and there's Fair Credit Reporting Act, and all these other things designed to protect consumers. Businesses don't have that. So you should feel comfortable getting credit applications, follow up on them, come up with policies. This is when we sue, this is when we cut them off, and then stick to them. Credit standards, the minimum financial strength that you're going to actually extend credit for. If it's a public company, you can look stuff up. You can read analyst reports. If it's a private company, which is most of the case, it's going to be a private business or a small business. You need to ask other vendors in their bank. You want a bank reference, you want trade references. And I will guarantee to you that folks who are extending credit to you will do the exact same thing. They're going to ask for trade references. They're going to ask for bank references. They even try and pull a Dun & Bradstreet report. which is a credit reporting agency for businesses. They tend to not be all that accurate, but it's better than nothing. Your terms are how long, under what conditions are you going to extend credit, and how long can you keep it out? And what point do you shut them down? Credit period, length of time for which credit is granted, and then when does it go delinquent? Are you 10-day terms? Are you cash on delivery? Are you 30-day terms, which are those are the three typical? Or do you have something else, 60, 90? Cash discount. You learn about this in accounting normally, where they go, oh, it's 210 net 30. So you get a 2% discount to pay within 10 days, otherwise net 30. If you, now having been finance scholars, get a 210 net 30 offer, do you take that offer or not? If you're sitting as the company being asked to make the payment. Why? What's the effective interest rate on a 210? You're getting a 2% discount to pay within 10 days. So you're getting 2% interest for essentially 20 days worth of money. When you annualize that out, it comes out to around 30%. So unless your required rate of return is higher than 30%, when you're getting a discount, take it. And by the way, if you're going to give a 210 net 30, because people go, oh, it'll speed up your payables, it's costing you 30% interest. The cash discounting is expensive. It encourages early payment. You may end up having to negotiate with folks to give them a cash discount, but at the end of the day, it's a very expensive way to do business. And normally this is a 1 or 210. So 2% off if you pay within 10 days, or 1% off if you pay within 10 days. Collection policy is essentially if someone goes delinquent, someone's not paying, what steps do you take in order to get them to pay? At what point do you start making phone calls? Should be about 5 days after the 30-day point. At what point, because they might have lost the invoice. And I'm not saying that I would do that, but sometimes I've lost invoices. And so that gives me 10 more days to pay by the time they get the invoice in. And I go, well, we only cut checks every Wednesday. So they can lose invoices. So about 5 days after it's late, you should make the phone call. You should send a letter about 5 days after that. You should probably cut them off at the 60-day point. You're laughing, but wait till you get out there. These are the words of wisdom. Receivables management, and I legitimately lost the invoice. It accidentally got recycled. The receivables monitoring, it's taking a look at who owes you money and making sure that once they get out past 60 or 90 days that you're following your collections policy. And more importantly, and this is this latter part, you're going to have customers that routinely pay you on time. They're good customers. When one doesn't start paying you on time, you're looking for a change in that pattern. If you have a customer that's always paying you at 60 days, even though your terms are 30, but they routinely pay you at 60 days, and it stays at 60 days, and they're reliable, kind of set your expectations accordingly, maybe set their pricing accordingly, but you're probably okay. As soon as somebody doesn't behave the way that they've always been behaving, and whether that's in payments, or whether that's an employee, or whether that's a significant other, as soon as they start behaving in ways that they haven't behaved before, you probably should figure out what the heck's going on. And if it is something in a payment stream, you may want to re-underwrite. You may want to re-ask for the credit application for, take a look and see if they're in the news. Take a look here in Washington. It's really easy to look in Washington courts and see if they've been tied up in a lawsuit, because you may be seeing a fundamental change in their ability to pay. And you want to cut them off before you have a bunch of exposure. Because once you go into bankruptcy court, like if you were Unilite Textiles and you just extended a bunch of credit to Bonton and then they file on you, you're stuck. You're likely an unsecured creditor and you're not going to get paid. Because by the time they pay the employees, the taxes, which become the first two, then there are secured creditors, then there are priority creditors, there ain't nothing left. So you want to make sure if you start seeing changes in behavior that you're able to get out in front of it and cut it off. Day sales outstanding, this is a calculation. You'll see it on the quiz. It's in the book. It's not really that hard. It's essentially saying, okay, what's the average collection period? What's my average daily sales? What's my average outstandings? Divide the two, you come up with the number of days, day sales outstanding. You want to monitor that number. And if it changes dramatically for a customer, or if it changes dramatically for your business, and I'm talking dramatically like 3 to 4 days, because you shouldn't be out more than 30 to 40 days. So that's 10% difference, is if it starts shifting a little bit later by 3 to 4 days, that's enough that it should raise alarm bells and you should be digging into it and trying to understand why. Is it one customer or two customer causing it at the company level, or is that customer going bad? Or do you have a customer going bad, their day sales outstanding is starting to climb pretty rapidly, in which case you want to shut them down and start making them do cash on delivery, so at least you're not extending additional credit. Most accounting programs have an aging schedule. All you have to do is push a button. And you push that button and out will spit, here's how much this customer owes us at current 30 days delinquent, 60 days delinquent, 90 days delinquent, 120, over 120. It's a standard report in almost every accounting package. If you're in sales management or sales, you want this information, because what's going to end up happening is if you're in sales, they're going to claw back your commissions if your customer doesn't pay. And you don't want to be in a position where you're having to pay back your commissions. So you want to stay on top of your customers. If you're in accounting or finance, you want to be running this as part of your weekly or monthly close process so that you're making sure that you're on top of anybody that's starting to get out on their delinquencies. And if you're in manufacturing, particularly custom manufacturing, you do not want to put in a bunch of custom orders for someone who isn't paying their bills. Because if you think about each customer as a tiny little business of its own, and you're buying and you think about that cash collection cycle, you can look at it at the big picture level for like Unilite. But the other thing you look at it for is at the customer level, especially if you've got custom orders and you're sitting there going, okay, I'm buying all these, specialty widgets. And if these guys go bad, my inventory value is near zero on scrap. I want to make sure that I'm monitoring my aging schedule. Don't let an accounting department tell you it's too hard to get, because it's not. It's a canned report in almost every accounting system. They push a button, they spit it out, you take a look at it, you make sure your customers are staying within 0 to 30 days delinquent. And if they get out past that, you should be taking steps to make sure that you're managing that process. Here's Unilite. Unilite has 50% of their receivables out over 30 days. They have 7.2% out over 90 days. They're likely to never see that $7.2 million. Once your accounts receivable in any business, once your accounts receivable gets over 90, your chance for collection goes down dramatically. As this goes, this isn't like a linear, like, okay, it's 90, 80, 70, 60. It's like 90, 60, 25 percent probability of collection. Each business is going to be a little bit different. You'll be able to monitor it. And if you're in accounting, one of the things that you're going to end up doing in accounting is you build your allowance schedule. So you go, okay, here's my allowance for bad debts. And your auditors are going to go, what's your basis for your allowance for bad debts? And you're going to use things like day sales outstanding, your aging and collection schedule, and go, based upon my history, here's what the average write-off is when something gets into 30 to 60, 60 to 90, over 90, and therefore I can build my allowance schedule off of that. From a cash flow perspective in finance, we want to track out how long it's going to take to turn this into cash. And if we're sitting on $7.2 million worth of receivables that are never going to turn into cash, we want to make sure that we're not factoring that in as cash receipts coming in off of sales at some point. So when things start going bad, you're going to make changes to your credit and collections policies. Every one of those is going to have trade-offs. The reason we extend credit is because you have an opportunity to increase your sales if you extend credit. The downside is somebody and some folks will not pay you. You will have bad debt losses. And every time you make a change to it, you can increase or decrease sales by extending credit or by not extending credit. You're going to have a trade-off in bad debt. So you have to look at what's my operating cost, what's my variable cost, what's my contribution margin, what do I expect for write-offs, how quickly do I expect it to come in, how much is it costing me to have the receivables out, and you want to try and optimize these things. So you may go, okay, the optimal cash collection policy for me might be, I'm going to offer net 10, and they're going to go COD at 30 days. And if you do that and your sales are too low, you may go, okay, I'm going to go net 30. And I'm going to cut people off at 60 days. That's going to change your sales. Your sales are likely to go up. It may cover more operating costs, but you're also going to extend your average collection period. You're going to extend your carrying costs on receivables because you're not collecting the cash as quickly, and you're going to have more bad debt losses. So it's going to be trade-offs, and there's wrong answers, and it's hard to find the right one. It takes some trial and error with your customers. And generally, when you're talking about credit and collections policies, it's customer level. You're looking at those customers, underwriting those customers just like a banker would underwrite you for a loan. Because remember, when you're extending credit as a business, you're extending loans. You're acting like a bank. And to the extent that your folks, that your counterparty, your customer is creditworthy, they could go to a bank and get credit and pay you. So don't let their little crocodile tears try and convince you that you need to extend them credit. If they can't get credit from a bank, and the bankers are experts at this, you probably should call the question whether you should extend them credit as well, which is why asking for a bank credit reference is important. So these last two, you model the thing out just like a capital budgeting problem. You look at your required rate of return, you look at how it's going to change your cash requirements in and out. And if the net present value is greater than 0, you adopt the new policy. And if it's not, you don't. We talked quite a bit about inventory management. I'm just going to touch on it quickly. Raw materials are things that come in you haven't done anything with yet. You want to minimize inventory. All the way through your collection cycle, all the way through your working capital management cycle, you want to minimize inventory. Inventory makes you no money. Finished goods sales make you money. Inventory sitting on your floor or sitting in your warehouse makes you no money. Ideally, you have 0 inventory. Ideally, you have negative inventory. You're like Dell. Raw materials are materials that have come in you haven't processed yet. Work in process means, if you think about it, going through an assembly line, raw materials is the steel. Work in process is the car moving down the assembly line, having the steel turned into car parts. Finished good is a car sitting on the lot, waiting to get shipped off to the dealer that bought it. You want to have, ideally, 0, very small, 0, if you're the manufacturer. If you're the retailer, you want 0, 0, and as small as possible to make sure that you don't stock out. Because what you're doing is you're tying up cash and inventory, waiting for someone to buy it from you. You're not earning any money. It's only costing you money to hold inventory. So again, optimal inventory level as low as possible. Inventory costs include carrying costs, and we've talked through these. Carrying costs, which is having it sitting around. Ordering costs. So one of the downsides is if you're just in time inventory, you're going to order every day. You're going to receive every day. There's a cost to that. Generally, it's lower than your carrying costs, but it depends on the type of inventory. If you're an accountant or an operations management, you calculate economic order quantity. So you look at your carrying costs, you look at your stock out times, you look at your order costs, and you go, essentially, here's my optimal order size that minimizes my total cost and allows me to continue to operate. I'm touching on some stuff that you're going to get in Dr. Frazier's class if you end up with Dr. Frazier for operations management. If you have a chance to take Wendy Frazier's operations management class, if you have a chance to take Wendy Frazier at all, do it. She's absolutely brilliant. And she does things that no one else does as it pertains to looking at how to optimize business operations. So that's one of my words of wisdom to you. You got a couple methodologies that are, these are top line methodologies. If you get into Dr. Fraser's class, she'll dig further into how to kind of put these things into operation. You got a red line method where essentially you've got an inventory set, and as soon as the inventory falls below a line, it's a Kanban system. So as soon as it hits a certain trigger point, that's when you reorder. So if you determine your economic order quantity is 20 widgets, you have a bin with your widgets in it, and you go, okay, at this point, you kind of draw a line so it's visual to anybody looking at it. As soon as that line shows up, or as soon as that color box shows up, you then reorder the next set of widgets at your economic order quantity. So that way you know what your time is to delivery, you're not going to stock out, and you're able to get your inventory in and you're not holding too much. You've got computerized inventory control systems, where essentially the computer systems look at your speed of production, look at your delivery times, and optimize this for you and tell you when to reorder. Usually you'll see those with barcode scanners and other things so that they're able to track inventory in and out. These are extremely expensive. I am here to tell you, if you take accounting systems, you will learn, maybe, that accounting systems are expensive. Accounting systems never deliver exactly what they say they're going to deliver. Software people lie, and the inventory control systems tend to be very expensive. People rely on them heavily, and if you don't use common sense, they're going to break you down. They're very expensive to implement. They're very expensive to continue to operate, and folks will tell you that it's all great and cool. Software salespeople, don't believe them. They're going to give you demos, and the only customers that they're going to give you are ones that are happy that they've paid to make happy. So when you're evaluating software, make sure you have a business requirements document done. You know what you need, so that when you go out and buy the software, they're trying to meet your requirements, not trying to sell you what they can do. Another word of wisdom. Just-in-time systems, essentially you order as it comes in, or as your orders come in, you order your raw materials. As soon as the raw materials hit, you run it through your assembly line and deliver. If you have a complex manufacturing system, you may have multiple orders for one customer order, i.e. computer, may have 3 or 4 different order points because it may take 2 days. You're going to order the motherboard on day 1, and you're going to order the monitor on day 2 or day 3 once it's coming in. You don't order all the parts at once. You literally order it just in time to put it in the box and ship it. Toyota, like Dell, like most manufacturing companies that have they have a relatively rapid delivery time, a relatively rapid manufacturing time, just in time makes a lot of sense. And outsourcing is something that one of my favorite local employers, Boeing Aerospace, does a lot of. So Boeing manufactures planes, and they've got a couple plants, one in Aquila and one in Everett. They manufacture largely airliners up here, and they manufacture military jets down in Long Beach. However, they don't manufacture most of the component parts for that. The wiring harnesses are made by companies in Kent. The seats are made by a company in Italy. The wings are made by a company in Japan. And they outsource a bunch of the manufacturing, and they do final assembly of the plane, generally here in Tukwila for single aisle, and up in Everett for double aisle aircraft, and down in Long Beach for military aircraft. But they don't manufacture most of the parts for that plane. They outsource the production of the engines to General Electric or Rolls-Royce. They outsource all the component parts. They assemble it here. Outsourcing is a great opportunity because you then shift a lot of the risk, a lot of the inventory cost over to your outsource partner. And then you tell them to deliver it when they're going to deliver it to you, when you need it. You then transfer the cost, transfer the expertise, because they are probably going to be better at it than you are, to your outsourcing partner. Outsourcing is not a bad thing. We tend to think of it as a bad thing. We tend to look at it as a bad thing when you see the news, or outsourcing this to Japan or outsourcing it to China. Most of the outsourcing is here in the United States. And even if it is outsourced overseas, generally that outsourcing is, and you'll learn this in economics, that outsourcing is generally beneficial for both the United States and United States workers, as well as the foreign country and the foreign country's workers. Free trade is a good thing. And so outsourcing is not necessarily a bad thing. It's optimizing production. And if you ever want to read something good and old, written in 1776, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. That brings us to the end of chapter 14 and 15. I'm now going to cover a few little snapshots or things for the final. I'm going to give a couple little words of wisdom and release you to the wild. So the review is going to be Monday night, 5:30 to 7 in this room. I'll be here a little bit early. I will stay as late as we can, although I think there's a final in this room at 7:30. So if there's still folks who have questions, we'll just move it out to the Harned lobby. But I want to make sure you guys feel comfortable as you can going into the final on Tuesday. The final on Tuesday will be from 10:15 to 12:15 here. There are two problems. There's a weighted average cost of capital problem and a capital budgeting problem. You will receive from me on Tuesday a paper packet. That paper packet will contain a few pieces of information. It's going to contain the questions, these two problems. It will contain the 20 multiple choice questions. It will contain a packet of financial statements. What I have done historically is handed people a packet with 96 pages and said, go find stuff. We don't have time for that in a 2-hour final. So I am going to take the pages that you need, put them together, and go, here's your stuff. Go find it. It's not going to be 96 pages. It's going to be 4 or 5 pages. It's all going to be pretty easy to find. You should have, if you have built your spreadsheets up, you should have no problem powering through this final in about an hour and 20 minutes. If you have not built your spreadsheets, you will have problems finishing this final. I'm going to give you a piece of advice now. This piece of advice is important. Some people don't listen. And for those of you who didn't come to class, you should listen. Start with the multiple choice questions first. The weighted average cost of capital problem is 30 points. The capital budgeting problem is 30 points. The 20 multiple choice questions are 40 points. That gives you 100 points. The 20 multiple choice questions are going to do two things. One, the way that most of us instructors work is the textbook comes with a test bank of thousands of questions, multiple choice problems, all sorts of stuff that we can pull. I choose 20 multiple choice questions that are relatively easy. They're from the easy section of the test bank. They cover chapters 1 through 15. There are no calculations on the 20 multiple choice. They are all concept questions. And I've had at least one of you tell me, sometimes they don't word those questions all that well. So I'm going to try and clean that up a little bit. You should get some confidence going into the test if you start with the multiple choice questions. Because you go, oh, this isn't that bad. And then you'll feel good by the time you get to here, which might not be as confident. The other thing is the 20 multiple choice questions, because they're concepts, may help you remember things that might be useful for these two. So it might be like, what is weighted average cost of capital? What do you need? What are the 3 components for weighted average cost of capital? That may be in the multiple choice question. So that way, when you get to weighted average cost of capital, you go, holy crap, there was a multiple choice question on weighted average cost of capital. It kind of triggered it. So if it was me, now I'm not the brightest guy, but if it was me, I'd start here. Then I would do weighted average cost of capital, then I'd do capital budgeting. Because you're going to find that the way I write tests, and some of you have seen my old tests because you had either friends in the classes that I've taught before, or you come see me and I walk you through the 2016 or 2017 final. The weighted average cost of capital problem feeds the capital budgeting problem. So make sure you do the weighted average cost of capital problem first, then the capital budgeting problem. So if it was me, I would take my order and I would go 20 multiple choice first, weighted average cost of capital, capital budgeting. If you run out of time, don't panic. Historically, there has been a curve on this of up to 40 points.
It's a huge curve.
It is. Don't panic. Just work your way through it. A couple other pieces of advice. You get to so this is open book, open notes, open computer, open spreadsheets, open calculators, open everything, except open mouse. No open mouse. I'm going to have you guys spread out. So you may want to try and find yourselves a couple little, because we got computers around the outside that don't get used. So we're going to be spread out here. So the only thing that's not open is open mouse. I would prefer that you guys also don't use like IM and IM back and forth, because, you know, that's just not cool. I'm trying to have some respect and dignity. So I'm going to trust you, but you have to also kind of not violate that trust. If you get a question that you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Or you get a question that's like, given a beta of this and a risk-free rate of that, calculate what is the X. And you're like, crap, I have no idea what the heck he's asking for. Because you have open notes, open book, open computer, you also have open Google. So if there's a term you don't understand, or it's stumping you on a multiple choice quiz or question, or it's stumping you on the problem, Google the term. Don't try and flip through your book. It's going to take too long. Google the term. The information you're going to get is going to be on a real company. So we're going to be doing the calculations, weighted average cost of capital, capital budgeting on a real company. If you can't find the stuff really quickly in the handout I give you, Google, oh my gosh, what is the effective tax rate for Microsoft in 2016? And a Google will probably come back with an answer. So that's just a couple hints. If you start getting panicked in this test, and what's happened where people have not done well isn't because they don't know the material or that there's not enough time. Where people haven't done well is they look at this list and they freak out and they go, oh my God, I'll never finish this. I'm going to die. And they just freeze. I'm here to tell you, Google is your friend. Use it. Right. Start with multiple choice. Get the confidence built. Couple last things. The end of the quiz or the end of the test. You're going to do your test in Excel. You're going to have this pack of paper. You're going to have Excel. You're going to put the answers to the multiple choice on a pack of paper and hand it back. You're going to take the Excel and use it to answer the weighted average cost of capital, capital budgeting problems. At the end of the final, you're going to take these two problems will be on paper. You're going to put the answers in a box on the paper and hand it in along with the 20 multiple choice. You are then going to email me your spreadsheet. Because if you screw something up and it flows all the way through to the capital budgeting thing, I'm not going to just keep taking points off everywhere. I'm going to take it off for the first thing. You have the wrong effective tax rate. You get the wrong effective tax rate, the weighted average cost of capital, everything's wrong. But I'm not going to mark it off all over the place. I'm going to go, okay, you screwed it up. Did you get the rest of it right? If you did, you're going to get 98% points on the dang thing. It isn't going to be, you get a 0 because you didn't get the right answers here. I'm looking for how do you do it, not did you get the right answer necessarily. You put in the wrong number, you transpose a number, but you got the formulas right, you're going to lose a point. You completely don't know how to do a weighted average cost of capital problem, or you don't know how to do a capital budgeting problem, that's where you got a problem. That's why if you actually do the spreadsheets ahead of time, you shouldn't have that issue at all, and you should be in pretty good shape. Extra credits. Any questions on the final? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about next Monday's study session.
Yes, ma'am.
Recording it, or is it just in your?
I wasn't planning on recording it because there's only a couple hours between the two, but I can, I suppose, but if no one's, so what I will say is if no one's here, there's no study session. So I'm not gonna just stand and record. So I mean, that's the other side of it. I don't have a problem recording because I know all you guys, I guess, you have other finals. I don't have a problem with that. Having said that, if no one shows up, there's no study session. Any other questions? Okay. Extra credit, due by Friday, 5/11 at midnight. Because I will spend next weekend grading and getting all the stuff out. You got the 2 papers. You got the quizzes 1 through 15. There's a number of you that didn't take a quiz or another for some reason or another. I don't know why. It's not my place to know why. But what I am giving you is a chance to go back. So if you go to the 29th of May, you're going to see all 16 quizzes stacked up there. You can take them, and I will give you 25% credit.
But if you already took them and you just want to hire her.
You're going to be better prepared for this. You'll get 25%. So, if you got a 0 on a quiz because you forgot or because you said screw it doesn't really matter, go in and at least take the darn thing. Even if you put A for everything and you get 25%, 25% of 25% is what?
5 points.
5 points is better than 0. It's not going to take that long. You've got a chance to redeem yourself. Chapter 16, the quiz is going up on Friday. You're going to be, the recording is already up on Moodle. It's 58 minutes. Chapter 16 is worth up to 10 points on the final. So I'm going to take your score on Chapter 16 quiz. I'm going to divide it by 10. I'm going to add that to the final, and that becomes extra credit. It's meaningful. It'll go up on Friday. It'll be due Friday at the 11th, so you have a week to do it. Yes, sir. So if you look at the syllabus, there's 2 papers. One's a 1-pager, one's a 2-pager. The 1-pager is essentially pull an article. You've got 2. Pull an article and from The Economist or a similar paper and identify something in it that's kind of germane to the class and write on it. The other one is find a public company, do a financial analysis on it using the ratio analysis that we learned early in the semester. Tell me if it's a good investment or not and turn it in. One is worth 10 points, one's worth 5 points. So you got up to 15 points on the final. You can turn them in whenever. But I'm giving you until Friday after the final because sometimes folks go, oh my God, I need those 15 points, and I want to make sure that you got a chance to do it. You can do both. You can do both papers. You can do any quizzes that you missed, and you can do Chapter 16 and get yourself up to 25 additional points on the final. So it's not a bad answer. Any other questions?
What's your average curve?
It was like 27 points. Folks, it has been a joy spending this last semester with you. If you have any questions, concerns, needs, etc., please come see me, and that includes after the semester is over. Enjoy finals week. Enjoy your Friday study day, and thank you very much.
Thank you. It was hard.
Say again?
It was hard.